is we're saying the feedback we're getting from industry is SIL's is too complicated and there's too much information, and a lot of the people are finding that daunting. So one strategy we want to try out there is to have an industry standard index for maternal sheep and terminal sire sheep, and I want to talk you through that. So they're saying it's too complicated and too much information. So how do you make sense of all that? So what we've said is, let's have a look at what's happening at the moment. We've got a variation in a lot of different, I'm going to call them total indexes, and I mean things like, several people have a DPO, dual purpose overall, but it'll have different components in it because they're measuring different things. Or they might say, I want a DPO but subtract this bit from it because I don't think the survival information is that reliable. And so we've also got lots of BVs in each index. So the design experts of our evaluation system and our indexes have said we need to have 3 traits for wool, even though we only measure fleece weight 12. But this confuses people. And this is the problem we've got. So we've also got a situation where people look at index weights and say, oh, if that's got a negative weighting on it, it must mean you're wanting to push it downwards. And often it needs that sort of weight or drag on it so it doesn't go up while, say, you weight. It's that weight we put on it has a drag on it so that we can push lamb growth without you weight following at quite the same rate. And our total index names are confusing. We've got DPO, we've got TSO, we've got DPP, we've got TSP, we've got DPO minus S, which people say that's why I've taken the survival component out, even though I've analysed lamb survival. DPO minus meat, because some of our breeders aren't measuring meat and some are, and so on. So added to that is people have got their own indexes, which we created a flexible system, which means we've got creation of lots of different indexes, and they can have names suggesting they are SIL indexes, but they're not. And so we sometimes have to do a lot of explaining as to what it all means. So to keep this simple, let's have a look at what we sometimes see. Here's a DPO that has every possible trait in it. I don't think anyone measures this if you go looking for a flock that does. Here's another one. Here's a DPO minus S, a DPP, and several other variations on the DPO. You can see they all have different things in them. And this breeder's got a custom index, and they've done this huge crime that SIL won't let them do of removing dual purpose adult size. So that's what the 2 yellow boxes are saying, just contrasting that one breeder has made a decision to drop that. How does a buyer make sense of this all? How does industry get a feel for what's going? We don't want to implement this and force it on you because we're saying you have to select in this way. What we're saying is, how can we present uniform information to buyers? You in your own breeding program can tweak things and alter things how you want. But a buyer might say, if I'm looking for terminal sire sheep or dual purpose sheep, I pretty much want to know that I'm getting these combinations of traits in the information that's provided to me. So we try to address this by not necessarily revealing everything that's under the hood. How many people go to buy a car and lift the bonnet on it when they first look at it? Okay, right. I'm been married to several people who aren't really interested in what's under the bonnet. This may sound very sexist, but a lot of people, it's a bit like some of the tools that Andrew was talking about. You want a tool to fulfill a purpose, you don't necessarily want to know how it works. And in this case, which of these rams will earn more money, I don't need you to tell me all about the BVs and things. And some buyers are like that, and it may be a simpler thing if we can have a standard scale that, yes, it won't rate animals entirely correctly for every different environment, but it is a standard scale. So here's all the BVs that are in an index. I talked before about those large number we've got there for wool, for meat quality, for growth, and for feck. The simple answer is we're trying to look at the economic value overall for these animals. So if we're going to have a new system, we're going to have to divorce it from the current system, and the way we've done that in the first instance is just come up with a slightly different name for the total index. Oops, I was just talking about how different people might present different information for the same analysis or same index. You can have different BVs appearing on a report. So if we go back to those index weights I talked about, I'm getting ahead of myself, I apologise. some people will interpret that, if they see this on a report, that survival has a massive impact in the index. For those of you who know the system, it doesn't, because the breeding values are very small. 0.0 something is multiplied by that. They might say this particular thing tells us that the index is going to reduce ewe size. That isn't our intention, and if it looks like it might be, we need to review what those weights are. Some people will say that, why is hogget fleece weight worth so much less? Well, it's not worth so much less. The same genes that give you lamb fleece weight, give you hogget fleece weight, give you ewe fleece weight. This is more to do with the way Tim's modelled where you get the money from. So you only get one hogget fleece weight, but you get multiple ewe fleece weights. So that's where that's coming from. Yes, but all the lambs can produce it. Yeah. If you're lambing lambs, sorry, if you're shearing lambs, they can all give it to you, whereas only half of them are female and only some of them go into the ewe flock. And this one here is where people say, well, I don't need to use the ewe penalty, but those weightings there are derived by the economic modelling that Tim and his team do on the assumption that this is in the equation. So if you were to take that out of the equation, we really should make those numbers smaller. And so Dan Brown did me a great disservice by saying we really should have different indexes. We've been trying to reduce the variation in indexes, yet I can see his argument. From a breeding point of view or a customer buying point of view, you may want a slightly different index. And I think perhaps when you're dealing with your ram buyers, you do that implicitly when you say, what are the sort of things or characteristics of your flock that you want to change with ram purchasing? And so you'll steer them towards particular BV combinations. So the industry standard index for the marketplace, to change the name and make it different, we've come up with this concept we're calling them maternal worth and terminal worth. Someone suggested we call them breeding worth, and then it was pointed out that we think that LIC or the dairy industry might have that trademarked, and so it might be cheaper not to rattle that cage. But maternal worth and terminal worth sound like a good idea. I favour the maternal because I think even though those of us in the room who are used to using SIL and talking with about the terminology, we understand dual purpose. I don't think it's an obvious term to everyone. Whereas maternal traits, some people would argue we should get rid of maternal terminal worth and call it meat worth because it's to do with a meat animal. Then we'd have two NZMs. So I'm stuck with the terminal because I didn't want to have it maternal and meat both where the first letter is an M. If you come up with better names, let me know soon before we really get going on this. And there's a fixed set of goal traits in the index, and this is where the debate comes. What should be in there? What defines those traits? And rather than having all those different BVs there, we don't want to simplify it by saying we're going to base the index on only 3 or 4 key BVs. We'll have under the hood all the BVs and sub-indexes you're used to for the goal traits we predict. But we'll promote just a small number of BVs as being things to put alongside an index in the marketplace when you're selling rams or buying rams. So the index composition is what you would be used to seeing on reports, but we wouldn't put that on a report. So the front page will no longer have that huge amount of information, which if you put it there, people think I should read it, and then they get confused. We should try and simplify what's presented in the first instance. We're not trying to dumb this down for you guys. We're trying to make it easier for your buying, selling market in that terms. So these are the goal traits we've decided should be there based on the fact that most dual-purpose people are measuring these traits. Some people will argue about lamb survival, but it's still a majority of people who are supplying good survival data. Those are the key marker BVs. There's basically one per goal trait: reproduction, number of lambs born, survival. You don't have to use all those, but if someone said, I want to go and buy some sheep using a New Zealand maternal worth index, they could expect to get an index based on those blue gold traits, and they could expect to see some or all of those marker BVs. We're trying to simplify what's on the report. Rather than some people reporting live weight 8, some people reporting DPG, some people reporting a weaning weight BV, just say, what are the things that sort of resonate with farmers about where they earn money? If you think that we should have carcass weight there rather than weaning weight, let us know. When it comes to what they're made up of the breeding values and the index weights that are standard SIL ones. That isn't obvious from the front page of a report, but it'll be available, that information, to make that link. And if we were to put up an equivalent current index called the DPP index, it's identical. If it's got the same gold trait groups in, the traits in blue there, the DPP based on those and New Zealand maternal worth would give you the same index value. If we look at the equivalent thing for terminals, we've got a smaller set of traits that define the animal, we believe, in all situations. Survival, growth and meat yield. We've got an extra BV here because we think the meat yield in the meat sheep, we need to look at both lean yield and fat yield. I think from the conversation we've had earlier in the day, and I've had with some of you before and after this morning's meeting, fat yield and muscularity and what's good fat in a ewe and what's not good fat in a carcass, that's an area of work in progress for SIL and BLG. We need to have a better idea about the value of fat in a ewe and the fat in a maternal animal. But even if we do come up with the answer to that, that doesn't mean we should go out into the marketplace and throw out more BVs on the table. What are the key BVs that a buyer should be looking at? And the others aren't unimportant, but they're the things that the buyer lets the breeder sort out. So there's 4 or 5 BVs that are important for dual-purpose sheep, 2 or 3 for terminal size for most buyers. The other BVs, like the milking ability, the mothering ability, DAGs and FEC, those are things that sort of come out of the program the breeder is delivering on. But the big ones are, does it grow well? Has it got wool? How much wool? How many lambs? And do they survive? It's as simple as that, we think. So in this case, you get an equivalent index. I don't think anyone I've ever seen a terminal sire production index. I think it's always billed as a terminal sire overall index, but it would be exactly the same. The indexes would have the same value. They'd be made up of the same things. If you put a TSP index or a TSO index on your report, you'd see that detail about what BVs and what their weightings are. If you put a New Zealand terminal worth index on your report, it won't give you the BVs and the weightings. Too much detail for the buyer. So what we'd see then is you'd see something like this on a report. It would say you've used the New Zealand Maternal Worth Index, we call it MW or NZMW for want of a better abbreviation, and it would just say this is based on reproduction, lamb survival, lamb growth, adult size, meat yield and wool production. And in terms of the adult size versus lamb growth debate, I haven't put ewe weight up there as a BV. They want fast growing lambs, it's up to you to sort out that they don't get fast growing ewes. If you go on.
Some people kind of worry a bit about that.
Pop that into the microphone, John.
I think that the weaning weight is important, which is a little bit different than growth because it's actually showing the ewe's milking ability, and I think you should have weaning weight plus the 8-week.
So you think you actually want to see a measure of both pre-weaning growth and post-weaning growth.
Yeah, and I think the clientele, where we sell our lambs, they would be concerned with those 2 traits.
So, that was from someone else? Yep. So pre and post-weaning growth. Yep. And do you believe that the ram buyer is comfortable with us presenting post-weaning growth as carcass weight, or do they think in terms of the weight of the animal, because that's the last time they see it? So you'd rather have the live weight 8?
Yeah, yep. I think the live weight 8 rather than...
Yep. Are there any you drop then? I'm just going to put, there's the ones we've got at the moment. You're saying you would add to that live weight 8. Would you drop any of those?
Unless you have a yield and micron, that's going in the wrong direction.
That current selection, if you select on greasy feast weight, is expected to shift micron into the coarser end. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm. And the ones that have been doing that for 30, 40 years have all dropped it.
So would you be, are you comfortable with that being survival being there? Some people have got big concerns about the survival BV. I think it's a sufficiently important trait that it should be part of a standard index.
How do you not record
Sure. You can have, if you're not diligent at sending in fates for lambs at weaning, or if there's some animals that are pregnancy scanned and haven't delivered the lambs you sort of expected, we might not have a good feel for how many of the lambs that how many total lambs there were and how many total lambs were weaned. So there's various ways those two totals can be off.
Most people scan their ewes today. They know which ones should be having twins and which ones they're not.
Yep.
And if they come in at weaning time and they've only got one lamb, you know through her lack of mothering ability or she's had some sort of lambing difficulty.
Yep.
There's a no-no, and it's and she should be downgraded to a virtue ewe with a single.
So, Murray.
The pregnancy scan isn't 100% accurate, in my opinion. So I'm having trouble with these points.
Yeah, pregnancy scanning isn't 100% accurate, and neither is saying when you go around the lambing beat first thing in the morning that the two lambs are hers. Yep. So I can't comment on whether one's more inaccurate than the other. Other people will know that better than me, but I take your point. There isn't an absolute truth that we can tie this to, Murray, is there?
I always thought there was. The lambs you saw were always right. Is that not right?
Good answer.
Mark,
can't argue with that.
Could we drop NLB and make it NLW?
Well, you mean bundle the BVs together effectively. So
Yeah.
you're looking at the combination of both.
Well, if you want to drop survival.
The geneticists, and I was pleased to see Dan had the same philosophy, they think they can add value to the merino industry by having, they had three components. They had ewe fertility, ewe litter size, and the survival. We could bundle them together in a way that we still kept the analyses separate because we needed to do that to get the maximum accuracy for its components. But how would you do that, Tim? You basically have to convert them to cents value and just say this is the number of lambs weaned cents value.
The argument for not putting them together is that, and I don't know whether this will happen, but if the industry gets to a point where we don't want any more lambs born, and you've got those two together in something called number of lambs weaned, you won't be able to, like, number of lambs born's got a higher heritability than survival, so you'll be selecting for weaned, but all you'll be getting is born because survival's hard to predict. And we'll overshoot then number of lambs born because in our compound trait, if you like, it'll be really selecting for born.
Well, you could actually be going backwards on survival
You could be going too far in born and that'll be taking survival in the wrong direction.
Mm. But surely you're still going to have those separate ones operating for us.
Yes.
What Mark's talking about is
presenting number of lambs weaned.
Yeah.
You just add them up. Add the NLB, the DPR and survival components together. You could do that.
Yeah, that's coming from Tim Byrne, the crown priest of indexes.
Okay.
We can't
religious,
multiply
Mark.
them, can we? Because the way we estimate them as deviations, you can't multiply number of lambs by survival like you can with real data.
You can add them though.
We can add them
Okay.
in terms of value.
You can add the after it's had the sub-index. You can add the sub-index component.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. That's the last slide of any consequence.
What about meat?
Is meat? That's a good question, Tim. Is meat yield, carcass lean yield, carcass fat yield a significant issue in maternal sheep as a lamb carcass trait, or is it more significant as a ewe body condition score trait? For the dual purpose people in the room, if we go and measure ultrasound fat and muscle, which do you rate it most for? Its ability to tell us something useful about the lamb or about the ewe.
What does the commercial farmer say when the buyer comes? Would you expect him to ask for BVs or is meat yield a driver of his or her purchase decisions in maternal sheep?
Yes, because they've got to finish the lambs.
That's a good enough reason to leave it in.
Might have. Absolutely. Murray.
Yes, it is. Yes.
You were meant to be out, It's a term code.
So,
Mark, can I just clarify something?
So what you choose, is that going to be the only
we
sort
want
of index we
we
can
want
get?
to have a standard that we will promote to industry.
But can a breeder that might find he's in a different environment, he's got different priorities, can he ask for an overall index, including just what he wants?
We don't want to change the overall index. If everyone in this room said meat yield shouldn't be in the dual-purpose maternal worth, we would probably take it out. But I haven't heard anyone say a uniform agreement about what shouldn't be there. Which BVs you choose to put alongside it, you can choose what you want, but that's part of the problem we have at the moment. You see different things with different ram sales. Richard.
How are you going to get a consensus from these discussions when some of us here are thinking really hard and the ramifications of what you say are huge?
We've got an online survey which I think we should extend out to breeders and particular people who've been at the meeting and had this discussion. Yep. We'll do that.
I think the other thing you need to be aware of, I don't know if I'd worry too much about confusing the commercial buyer, because when we're getting reports, it's mainly for us to look at, and then it's up to us to explain it to the commercial client. And we can, I mean, if we
have had feedback that one of the problems is they get different information from different sources.